On the previous episode, I prepared my soil for planting. On this episode, I'll take you through the process of segmenting my soil into plots and planting the seeds. Ideally, the first step in my garden would be edging it, but due to time restrictions, I had to get the seeds in the ground. Not on camera was the 40 bags of compost I added to my soil. It would have been better to get a dump truck full of soil to cover my yard, but who knows, maybe next year I can afford that. I first grabbed a 2x4 and used it to lay out some basic lines in the soil where I wanted to create my garden squares. After my grid pattern was drawn out in the soil, I proceeded to dig it out, piling up the extra soil on the plots. In general, all the lines in the soil were as wide as my boot, making it easy to walk between my crops. I also have 4 concrete blocks that I laid down as jumping stones to easily make my way in and out of the garden. Here I have a Swiss chard starter in the ground that was planted all in one block. It's important before they get much bigger that I separate them so they have much more space to grow. Next up, I'm planting some Italian lettuce. Throughout this series, you'll see a handful of unique Italian vegetables in my garden, as there's a store locally that carries these imported seeds. After loosening up the soil a bit, I put the seeds in and try to pat them down into the soil a bit, then I cover them up. After the seeds are in, give them a watering to start the sprouting process and make them a little more sticky so they cling to the soil and not just blow away in the wind. A few things in my garden aren't started from seed, like these strawberries that my neighbor gave me. As I plant this buttercup squash, you can see I placed the popsicle stick on the north side of every soil plot to make it easy to find the label of any of my crops. Now, if you're wondering why I made these trenches in my garden, it's quite simple. Last year I had a garden plot in Vancouver just beside a river. The ground was very fertile but also very wet. I noticed an elderly Chinese man had done this with his garden plot, and when it rained, all the excess water had run into the trenches and away from his plot, preventing them from flooding. He had a very successful yield, much more than most others in the community garden, so I adopted his approach. On the side of my house is a strip of yard that's just a useless strip of grass. Determined to make good use of it, I dedicated this area to anything large like squash, cantaloupe, melons, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, kohlrabi, beets, and carrots. This final patch of soil here gets the least amount of sun and is full of rocks. It's not ideal for growing anything really, but I chose this as my leafy greens patch. Here you can see the final result. All the squares are dug out, and any spot with a long barbecue skewer sticking out of it is one that isn't planted yet, which makes it really easy to know how many plots I have left. This large square at the front of my yard is my best land. It gets the most sun and is mostly devoid of rocks. Along this brick wall, I'll plant corn and corn only. This L-shaped spot around the house where the plum tree used to be has nice loose sandy soil I'll save exclusively for tomatoes and peppers. At this point, over half my garden is planted, closer to probably around 60%. As summer approaches, I'll put in the warmer weather crops like the tomatoes and peppers. Well, this concludes this episode. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and have a great day.